Welcome back, fellow travelers. Before today's descent, I ask for a brief signal. If you could leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel, it would make a huge difference. You help our community grow and bring these questions to new minds. I appreciate you being part of this exploration. Now let us begin. The first time I saw Emma after the treatment, she was sitting in the clinic's garden, watching a butterfly with the same vacant expression my golden retriever had when looking out the window. It wasn't exactly a dead look. There was something there, a spark of contentment, satisfaction. No, those words implied too much complexity. It was something more primitive than that. "Emma," I called, approaching slowly. She turned her head in my direction, a smooth and natural movement like a plant following the sun. A smile formed on her lips, not the tense and forced smile I knew from years dealing with her depression, but something genuine and simple. "Michael," she said. And that was it. My name, pronounced as if it were just a pleasant sound, without the weight of our history, without the layers of guilt, resentment, and failed love that usually accompanied it. I sat beside her on the bench. The advanced neurological clinic's garden was immaculate, perfectly cut grass, flowers arranged in precise geometric patterns. Everything there suggested control, order, the promise that the chaos of the human mind could be tamed. "How are you feeling?" I asked, though I knew the question was useless. Lotus Protocol patients didn't feel in the conventional sense. "Well," she replied, turning back to watch the butterfly. "Very well." It was true. All biological markers confirmed it. Perfect blood pressure, minimal cortisol levels, neurotransmitters in ideal balance. After 3 years developing the drug, I had achieved the impossible, completely eliminating human suffering. The price was just, well, eliminating the human too. But let me explain how it all began. It all started 5 years earlier, on a particularly cruel sleepless night. It was 3:42 in the morning and I was in the laboratory, looking at the results of tests on rats. The animals treated with the initial version of the compound showed peculiar behavior. They weren't exactly catatonic, but had lost all anxiety, all fear, all complexity. "Still here, Dr. Albright?" I turned to find Sarah, my research assistant, entering the laboratory with 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, gratefully accepting the drink. "I keep thinking about whether we're on the right path." Sarah examined the data on the screen. "The results are promising. 0 stress indicators, 0 depressive behaviors. But look at the cognitive tests." I pointed to another set of graphs. "Problem-solving capacity has plummeted. It's as if they had regressed," she completed. The word hung in the air between us. Regression. That was exactly it, but not in the traditional psychoanalytic sense. It was something more fundamental, an evolutionary regression, a return to a simpler, purer state of consciousness. "You know what's ironic?" I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. "I spent my whole childhood envying my dog. He simply existed. No worries about the future, no regrets about the past, just the present moment, eternally." Sarah laughed, a tense sound. "We've all wished for that at some point. Especially, she hesitated. "Especially after what happened with David. My younger brother, who at 28 decided that consciousness was too heavy a burden to carry. The note he left was philosophically elaborate. Pages and pages about the absurdity of existence, the tyranny of self-consciousness, the hell of being eternally trapped inside one's own head. It was his death that led me to this research. If I couldn't bring David back, maybe I could save others like him, others like Emma, my ex-wife, who fought daily against her own mind." When we began the first human tests, we were extremely cautious. We selected only volunteers with severe depression, cases where all other treatments had failed. The drug, which we internally called Lotus, in reference to the lotus eaters from the Odyssey, was administered in minimal doses. The results were immediate and impressive. "It's like a weight has been lifted," said Marcus, our first patient, after a week of treatment. "It's not that I'm happy, exactly. It's more like You know when you wake up from a complicated dream and for a few seconds you don't remember anything? It's like that all the time now. Encouraged by these initial results, we gradually increased the doses. Patients reported similar sensations, a mental simplicity that bordered on the sublime. It wasn't unconsciousness, but something prior to the complexity of adult human consciousness. Yesterday I spent 2 hours looking at the clouds, Lisa, another patient, told us. Not thinking about them, not imagining shapes or meanings, just looking. It was the most peaceful moment of my life. The side effects seemed minimal. Some difficulty with complex tasks, certain slowness in abstract reasoning. But compared to the suffering they had experienced before, it was a small price. Or so we thought. The first indication that something was profoundly wrong came from Thomas, a philosophy professor who had volunteered for the program after years struggling with existential depression. Dr.
Albright, he said during a follow-up consultation, 3 months after starting treatment. Something curious is happening with my books. How so? He frowned, struggling to articulate the thought. I look at them and I know they used to mean something. I see the words, recognize the letters, but it's as if they were just shapes on paper. Immediately, we conducted complete cognitive tests. Thomas could still read mechanically, but comprehension of abstract concepts had evaporated. Metaphors were incomprehensible. Ironies went unnoticed. It was as if the upper layers of his consciousness were being delicately peeled away. Am I worried? He asked me during one of the tests, and there was something disturbing in the genuine curiosity of his voice. I feel like I should be worried, but worry is just a word now. Sarah suggested stopping the treatment immediately, but Thomas refused. For the first time in decades, I'm not suffering, he said simply. If the price is not understanding Nietzsche, so be it. As the study progressed, troubling patterns began to emerge. The patients weren't just losing the capacity to suffer. They were losing the capacity to conceive of suffering. Painful memories remained, but stripped of their emotional sting. It was like looking at photographs of someone else. It was in this context that Emma entered the program after our separation. I had tried to dissuade her, but she was determined. You don't understand, she said, sitting in my office, hands trembling slightly, effect of chronic anxiety. I wake up every morning and my first thought is calculating how many hours I need to endure until I can sleep again. My mind is a prison, Michael. If your drug can free me. It's not freedom, I tried to explain. It's like turning off parts of who you are. Good, she replied. I hate who I am. Emma's treatment progressed faster than the others. Perhaps because her desire to escape was more intense, or perhaps because I, unconsciously, adjusted her doses to ensure maximum effect. In 2 weeks, the tormented woman I knew had disappeared. In her place was something, who smiled genuinely when seeing the sun rise, who could spend hours admiring the texture of a leaf, who ate when hungry and slept when tired, without the intervention of thousands of anxious thoughts. Are you happy? I asked during a follow-up session. She tilted her head, processing the question like an old computer. Happy, she repeated, savoring the word. Yes, happy is now. Now? Now is good. Now is always good. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Emma had achieved what mystics had sought for millennia: pure presence, existence without the mediation of the thinking ego. But at what cost? Yes. Sarah was the first to use the word we all avoided. We're creating zombies, she said during a team meeting. Philosophical zombies, beings that act like humans, but without real consciousness. They have consciousness, I argued defensively, just not our complex, self-referential, suffering-generating consciousness. And what's the difference between that and having no consciousness at all? It was a question that haunted me. Watching the patients in the garden, they always gravitated toward the garden, like plants seeking light. I saw contentment, but was it human contentment? Or had we discovered something more disturbing,
That genuine happiness was incompatible with full human consciousness. The turning point came when I discovered Sarah in the laboratory, late at night, preparing a dose of Lotus. "What are you doing?" She didn't try to hide it. "You know what I'm doing." "Sarah, no. You don't have clinical depression. The effects on a healthy brain." "Healthy brain?" She laughed bitterly. "I spend nights awake replaying conversations from years ago. I agonize over choices I made in college. I project catastrophic scenarios for a future that probably won't even happen. Is that health?" "That's being human." "Exactly." She held the syringe, observing the clear liquid. "What if being human is the disease?" I managed to dissuade her that night, but the seed was planted. In the following weeks, I noticed subtle changes in the staff. Technicians who seemed more serene. Nurses who smiled with the same vacant quality as the patients. The temptation was understandable. Who, observing the absolute peace of the treated, wouldn't desire that liberation, especially knowing it was within reach of a simple injection? And it was Emma who made me understand the true nature of what we had created. I was visiting her in the garden. I had become a frequent visitor, morbidly attracted to the placid creature that had once been my wife, when a bee landed on her hand. In her anxious days, Emma would have panicked. Now she simply observed the insect with distant curiosity. "We're the same now," she said. "You and the bee?" "All of us. You, me, bee, flowers." She gestured vaguely toward the garden. "Everything, same." "We're not the same, Emma. You're human." She looked at me with something that could be pity, if she were still capable of such complex emotions. Human is just a word, like sadness, or tomorrow. Words. It was then that I understood completely. We hadn't cured human suffering. We had cured the human of suffering, dissolving the very thing that made us human. The recursive consciousness, the capacity to think about thinking, to suffer about suffering. That wasn't a bug, it was the feature. I tried to publish my concerns, alert the medical community about what was really happening, but the results spoke for themselves. Zero suicide rate among patients, quality of life indicators through the roof, families reporting dramatic improvements. "You're letting your personal feelings interfere," said the clinic director, "just because you're ex-wife." "It's not about Emma," I lied. "It's about what we're doing to humanity. We're offering a choice. No one is forced to take the treatment." But was it really a choice? For someone in deep suffering, offering the cessation of that suffering wasn't choice. It was coercion of the most subtle kind. Despite my objections, regulatory approvals came quickly. Lotus, now with the commercial name Serenix, was launched worldwide. The lines at clinics resembled those of technology product launches. People camped for days to be the first to receive the promised liberation. The social effects were immediate and devastating. Artists stopped creating. What need was there to express existential anguish when it no longer existed? Philosophers abandoned their chairs. Why question the nature of existence when one could simply exist? "It's the end of history," Sarah told me. She still resisted the treatment, but I saw the temptation growing in her eyes. Not history in the sense of events, but history as human progress. How do we evolve without the dissatisfaction that drives us? We had no answer. We just watched as humanity, voluntarily, began its exodus from consciousness. I visited Emma one last time, a year after the start of her treatment. The clinic's garden was crowded now. Dozens of patients in various stages of what we called simplification. Some still maintained traces of complex personality. Others had progressed to more fundamental states. Emma was among the most regressed. I found her lying on the grass, watching the sky with the same vacant attention a cat gives to a spot on the wall. "Emma?" She turned her head slowly. The recognition in her eyes was minimal. I was just another stimulus in the environment, neither more nor less interesting than the wind in the leaves. "Do you remember me?" I asked, knowing the futility of the question. "Remember," she repeated, as if tasting an exotic food. Then she smiled, that empty and perfect smile. Now, only now. I sat beside her. Around us, other ex-patients wandered or rested, all sharing the same aura of bovine contentment. It was peaceful, terribly, incomprehensibly peaceful. "We did it," I murmured. "We cured human suffering." Emma didn't respond. She had closed her eyes, face turned toward the sun like a flower. She breathed deeply and rhythmically, in perfect synchrony with the world around her. I watched her for long minutes, my tormented mind contrasting brutally with her absolute peace. The irony was cutting. I, who had created the cure, remained uncured, trapped in the prison of consciousness, envying the prisoners I had freed. In my pocket, I felt the weight of the syringe I had carried for weeks. My personal dose of Lotus, prepared and re-prepared, waiting for the moment of courage, or cowardice, necessary. The sun was setting, tinting the sky with colors that Emma observed without interpreting. Around us, the other patients began moving inside, following primitive rhythms of light and darkness. I took the syringe from my pocket, observing the liquid that promised peace. It wasn't suicide, I told myself. It was reverse evolution, a return to the pre-conscious Eden from which we should never have left. Emma opened her eyes and saw me with the syringe. For a moment, just a moment, something complex passed across her face. It wasn't exactly recognition or understanding, but perhaps a distant echo of what had once been the capacity to understand. "Good," she said simply. "All good." And maybe it was. Maybe human consciousness, with all its capacity for suffering, art, love, and despair, was just an evolutionary mistake, a dead end that nature was now correcting through our own ingenuity. I positioned the needle against my arm. In minutes, the storm in my mind would cease. There would be no more guilt about what I had created, no more questions about what it means to be human, just being. "Dr. Albright?" I turned to find a young nurse, new, apparently, still untouched by the treatment. Her eyes showed the tortured complexity I was about to abandon. "Yes? There's a journalist wanting to speak with you about the recent developments." Recent developments? The euphemism for the fact that 30% of the adult population had opted for the treatment. Entire societies reorganizing themselves around a growing population of post-conscious beings. I put the syringe away. Not yet. Someone needed to document this, needed to witness the transformation. Someone needed to remain conscious enough to record the end of consciousness. "Tell them I'll be right there," I replied. I stood up, leaving Emma in her empty beatitude. As I walked back to the building, passing dozens of ex-people in their pharmacological Garden of Eden, one last irony occurred to me. In the original myth, eating from the tree of knowledge expelled us from paradise. Now, we had created a fruit that undid that knowledge, that returned us to the garden. But the price was ceasing to be those who could appreciate the return. The journalist waited for me in the lobby, notepad in hand, eyes full of complex questions that soon, very soon, no one would be able to ask anymore. "Dr. Albright," he began, "how do you respond to accusations that Serenix represents the end of human civilization as we know it?" I looked back toward the garden where Emma and others floated in their chemical nirvana. "I don't respond," I said finally, "because to respond I would need to believe that human civilization as we know it was worth saving." The journalist blinked, clearly not expecting such an answer. Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see the line of people waiting their turn for admission, their chance at liberation. In my pocket, the syringe weighed like a world that soon I too would leave behind. But not yet. There was still work to do, horrors to document, the end to witness. Not yet, but soon, very soon.